I pulled into my lake property and found an excavator tearing through the front half of my house, while an HOA contractor graded a road straight toward the clubhouse. I stopped the crew and demanded the work order. What they showed me raised a much bigger question. Who had told them that land was theirs? I had been gone for 2 nights on a work trip. The HOA had been renovating our clubhouse for months, so when I turned onto the Ridge Road and saw orange cones, a dump truck, and fresh dirt near the curve, I assumed they were working on that project again. Then I saw the excavator. It wasn't beside my property, it was on it. The machine was sitting where my front deck had been. Half the deck was already a pile of broken boards. The lake-facing wall of my living room was gone. Part of the roof above it had been pulled down, and through the opening I could see what was left of my kitchen. Then the excavator bucket moved again. I stopped my truck on the shoulder and started taking pictures. The excavator, the broken wall, the stakes across my yard, and the fresh dirt corridor running downhill toward the clubhouse. They weren't repairing anything. They were clearing a road through my house. I walked toward a man in a hard hat standing beside a contractor pickup and called out that I owned the house. He looked at me, then at the excavator. Shut it down. The operator stopped immediately. The foreman introduced himself as Luis Ortega and asked me to stay outside the marked work area while he called his superintendent. I pointed toward what used to be my living room. I live there. Luis looked back at the house, then down at the packet clipped to a board in his hand. We were told the structure had been released. Released by who? The client. The client was the HOA. I asked to see exactly what they had been given. Luis didn't hand me the packet, but he held it where I could read the pages that applied to the work and let me photograph them. The first sheet was a revised field plan for the clubhouse access road. The new route started at the Ridge Road, crossed the front of my lot, ran directly through the footprint of my house, and continued downhill toward the clubhouse. Across the outline of my house was one word: remove. The next page was the structure removal scope. Then came the client release. It wasn't a deed or title report. It was a contractor workflow document saying the client had turned over the work area, handled owner and property access coordination, authorized utility isolation, and released the structure for removal. A separate internal safety checklist showed that pre-demolition utility and site preparation steps had been completed. Luis explained that his company handled the demolition procedure on its side, but the client was responsible for having the right to give them the site. At the bottom of the release was a signature: Melissa Grant, the HOA president and board-designated project liaison. You were specifically told this house was released to the project? That's what the client certification says. And nobody thought it was strange there was furniture inside? Luis looked uncomfortable. Contents can still be inside a structure that's been released. We don't decide whether the client has the right to release the property. This wasn't an operator crossing the wrong stake. Someone at the HOA had told a professional contractor that my home had been turned over for removal. Luis called his superintendent. Nothing moved after that. The graded strip ran straight from the Ridge Road toward the clubhouse. My house was the only large thing in its path. The superintendent arrived about 20 minutes later and told everyone to stay clear of the damaged section. Up close, the damage was worse. The excavator hadn't just peeled siding from a wall. The crew had removed most of the lake-facing wall on the first floor, torn through the deck, and pulled enough framing out that part of the roof was hanging lower than it should have been. My kitchen was exposed to the outside. The living room was open air. A section of the upstairs floor had lost support. I told the superintendent I needed to get inside. He said I could reach the rear portion, but he strongly recommended I stay away from the damaged framing until someone qualified had inspected it. The back entrance was still intact. Inside, the place was obviously lived in. Couch, dishes, clothes, everything. But the contractor's paperwork said owner coordination had been handled and the site released. The crew had been told the HOA had already resolved the property and access issues necessary to hand it over. The power was off, so was the water. The superintendent explained that the demolition package triggered ordinary pre-work isolation. Project trades had shut off the electrical service at the exterior disconnect and closed the accessible water service before structural removal began. They hadn't canceled my accounts or decided ownership. They had isolated the services because the client had released the structure into the demolition scope. I took what I could safely reach. My laptop bag, medication, clothes, household records, and a fireproof box from a rear bedroom. I left everything near the damaged front half alone. The crew put up temporary barriers. No demolition resumed. I asked Luis when they had started. A little after 7. It was just past 9:30. In less than 3 hours, they had taken a completely usable home and made it unsafe to occupy. The work order called for full removal. I hadn't stopped them before they bulldozed my lake house. I'd stopped them before they finished. A black SUV came around the curve. Melissa Grant got out, looked at the excavator, then at me. She didn't look confused. She looked annoyed that the work had stopped. Melissa walked toward us with a phone in one hand and a folder under her arm. "Why is the crew stopped?" Luis answered first. "The homeowner is here. He says this is his primary residence." Melissa looked at me. "I know who he is." I held up my phone with the photograph of her signed release. "Then why did you sign this?" She glanced at the screen. "The contractor was released to proceed under the approved access alignment." "That isn't what I asked. You released my house for demolition." Melissa didn't deny signing it. "This structure sits within the Clubhouse access reserve." The project team was advised that the corridor issue had already been resolved. Resolved with who? The association controls the corridor. Show me the document. This isn't the place to litigate association records. I'm not litigating anything. Your contractor just tore the front off my house. Show me the document you relied on before you released it. Melissa looked toward the superintendent. The county approved the access project. The contractor has the current alignment. The superintendent said only that his company was paused until its office cleared the site control issue. Melissa turned back to me. "The access route is necessary for the Clubhouse project. It serves the entire community. That still doesn't tell me why my house was marked remove. The reserve predates your ownership." I asked what she believed that reserve actually allowed the association to do. Melissa said old developer materials described clubhouse access corridors that were supposed to remain clear for future road construction and maintenance. "So you're saying a planning corridor lets you remove a house?" "I'm saying this structure should never have been allowed to obstruct an association access reserve." Melissa was claiming an old developer access concept gave the HOA enough continuing control to clear physical obstructions from the route. If that were true, why had the HOA approved my house in the first place? Melissa opened her folder and showed me a color project exhibit. A red line ran from the Ridge Road toward the clubhouse and crossed directly through my property. "This is the approved corridor." I checked the title block. It was a current project drawing, not a deed, easement, or recorded property document. "When was this created?" "The engineering team has been working on this alignment for months." That wasn't my question. She closed the folder. Behind her, the excavator was still sitting where my deck used to be. The line through my property went straight through the flattest part of my lot toward the clubhouse. A road north of my property would have to bend around the slope. Longer route, more grading, more retaining work. I didn't know the numbers yet, but I could see which route was easier. Melissa told me the HOA would send relevant project records later that day. I told her I wanted 4 things in writing: the document establishing the corridor, the board authorization supporting the release of my structure, the contractor instruction, and the county permit tied to the alignment they were building. She crossed her arms. "You need to understand that stopping this project affects everyone." I looked at the opening where my living room wall used to be. "No. You need to understand that your project is already inside my house." Before she left, I told her no one was coming back onto my lot for road work without written notice and a specific authorization I could review. Emergency stabilization was different. I wasn't going to stop someone from preventing the rest of the roof from falling, but road construction on my parcel was over until the HOA could explain what it thought it controlled. That afternoon, my house was no longer livable, so I checked into a hotel and opened my laptop. The county's development services portal showed a real land disturbance and private access road permit tied to the clubhouse renovation, with an engineering firm and an approved road plan. I downloaded the stamped plan set and opened the road sheet. The road was there, but it wasn't going through my house. The county-approved alignment stayed north of my property, followed common land around the slope, then curved down toward the clubhouse. My lot was untouched. No clearing corridor crossed it. No structure was marked for removal. I pulled up the photograph of Luis's field plan. Same project number. Same engineering firm, same destination, different route. The contractor's drawing had a later revision date and shifted the road across my property. I almost emailed Melissa immediately, then stopped. A portal copy wasn't enough to prove there hadn't been a later county approval that simply hadn't been posted. So I contacted the county section listed on the road permit. I attached the project number, the field plan revision number, a photograph of the contractor drawing, and pictures showing the grading at my house. My question was simple. Was Route B part of the county-approved road and land disturbance permit set? Then I called the contractor's office. They confirmed that demolition remained suspended on my property and that Melissa's client release had actually been part of the pre-demolition package. Their internal safety clearance covered utility isolation and work zone preparation. It did not decide property ownership. The workflow paperwork could make demolition operationally possible without creating the underlying property right Melissa claimed. Later that evening, an HOA email arrived. The subject line was, "Clubhouse Access Project, Temporary Work Interruption." Not damaged residents, not demolition. Temporary work interruption. Melissa wrote that the contractor had been operating under the current project alignment and that work had been paused to clarify what she called a documentation concern. Then she strengthened the claim. According to her, my house was located inside a community access area reserved long before I bought the property. She attached a color exhibit labeled Access Alignment Exhibit. A shaded strip ran through my lot. Across it were the words, Community Access Reserve. At the bottom of the email, she said the association expected owners to cooperate with approved infrastructure work and would review responsibility for unnecessary contractor delays if access continued to be obstructed. The HOA had torn open my house, and Melissa was already laying groundwork to blame me for the cost of stopping them. I didn't answer the accusation. I wrote back, "I dispute the association's claimed right to enter or perform road work on my parcel. Please provide the source document that created the alleged access reserve, not a current project exhibit depicting it." Then I added, "Please also identify the county-approved revision authorizing the road alignment shown on the contractor's field plan." At that point, I had two versions of the same road project sitting side by side on my screen. One had been stamped by the county. The other had been used to start tearing down my house. The next morning, I opened the fireproof box I'd taken from the rear bedroom. My closing file contained a copy of the recorded subdivision plat and the legal description for my lot. The lot ran from the Ridge Road down toward the lake exactly where I understood it to. There was a narrow utility easement along one side. There was no road corridor drawn through the middle. A plat copy didn't settle every possible old access question. More useful was the HOA's old architectural approval for the house. The site plan showed the same basic footprint, driveway, deck, and setbacks, with the association's approval stamp. I put that plan beside Melissa's access exhibit. Her supposed reserve ran directly through a house the association itself had approved. I sent the old approval to the board. Please explain how the association's prior approval of this house is consistent with the claim that its footprint has always been an active community access reserve. Then I submitted a formal records request for board packets, engineering alternatives, title or site control reviews, contractor revisions, and documents relating to any claimed access right through my property. Around noon, a structural contractor sent through the HOA's carrier confirmed the front section couldn't be occupied and needed temporary stabilization. I approved bracing, weather protection, and damage assessment in writing. No grading, no road work, no new stakes. I was protecting the house, not cooperating with Route B. That afternoon, I drove back while the stabilization crew worked. From the rear side of the property, the geometry was even clearer. The road crew had already graded downhill beyond my house. The corridor ran nearly straight toward the clubhouse. The county-approved route north of me would have to swing around the slope and descend at an angle. The route through my house was shorter, straighter, and easier. Then the contractor's project manager called me. He said the road alignment they had originally priced wasn't the one that went through my house. That route had been changed later, by the HOA. He sent me a short written summary after our call. The contractor wasn't taking a position on property rights. It simply confirmed the sequence in its own records. The original bid package showed the road following the longer northern route on HOA common property. A later revision moved it across my lot. The contractor received that as an owner-directed revision. Before releasing the changed route to the field, the contractor had asked whether the client controlled the new work area and whether the client and engineer were handling any permit revision required by the change. The HOA response said, "Site control confirmed. Revised alignment cleared for field release." Permit coordination by owner-engineer. I asked who sent it. Melissa. The date was several weeks before demolition. I went into the HOA's archived Clubhouse project packets and started downloading everything. A few months back, I found a memorandum from the engineering firm comparing two access road options. Route A stayed entirely on common property and wrapped around the northern slope before descending toward the clubhouse. Route B crossed my lot. Route A required more retaining wall, drainage, paving, and time, and it eliminated 16 parking spaces. Route B was shorter and cheaper. The estimated difference was roughly $400,000. Route A also added 6 to 8 weeks to the schedule. Then I saw the note beneath Route B. Preferred for cost and parking efficiency, subject to title.site control verification. Not existing corridor confirmed. Verification required. I pulled up the contractor transmittal. Several weeks later, site control confirmed. The engineer said verification was needed. The accountant was still waiting for title confirmation. The contractor later received a statement saying control was confirmed. What I couldn't find was the event in between. From that point forward, I stopped arguing generally about the property and started tracing the missing verification. I searched the board packets between those dates. One meeting summary said the association was still reviewing access documentation for Route B. Another budget note kept part of the Route A contingency open in case the alternate alignment couldn't be released. Then I found an email from the project accountant. "Do we keep the Route A contingency until title confirms B?" Melissa replied, "Hold it for now. We have an existing developer access reserve in the association files." A board member later asked whether title verification had been completed. Melissa said the property manager was reviewing the archive. Then the contractor sent a schedule warning. If the final alignment wasn't released by the end of that week, the grading crew would be reassigned to another project and remobilization charges would follow. The clubhouse reopening date would slide again. There it was. Melissa had a lawful route the HOA unquestionably controlled. It just cost roughly $400,000 more, delayed the reopening by weeks, and cost the project 16 parking spaces. Route B only stayed cheap if the HOA already had the right to use my land. If they had to negotiate with me, acquire anything, or redesign after mobilization, the benefits started disappearing. The entire project depended on whether that old reserve actually gave the HOA present-day site control. The records showed the question being asked. They did not show anyone answering it before Melissa told the contractor it had been answered. The next morning, I sent one question to the full board. Please identify the document that changed Route B from subject to title.site control verification to site control confirmed. A few hours later, Thomas Reed, the board secretary, replied to everyone. He said he didn't remember the board approving any acquisition, easement agreement, or settlement involving my property. Melissa responded that no acquisition had been necessary because the association's right predated my ownership. According to her, the engineering note referred only to confirming the location of an existing developer reserve. I asked for the underlying document establishing that reserve. Melissa sent me a scanned page from an old developer planning binder. It was decades old. The drawing showed the original clubhouse, several proposed roads, open areas, and future improvements. Near my lot was a dashed line labeled Future Clubhouse Access. General planning notes said future clubhouse access corridors were supposed to remain unobstructed for later road construction and maintenance. Melissa was treating the developer's planning intent as a continuing association right to clear anything that later stood in the route. But the document had no dimensions, precise legal description, or modern Route B footprint. Years later, the HOA had approved my house in the same area. The old document explained her theory. It did not fill the authority gap. I sent the old developer exhibit and the later architectural approval to the board side by side. What document carried this planning concept forward as a verified present-day site right when the association approved construction of the house? Nobody answered directly. 2 days later, the HOA portal posted a new project notice. The attachment was titled Clarified Clubhouse Access Exhibit. The faded dashed line from the old planning binder had been translated onto a current parcel map. The modern Route B alignment ran directly through my property. A label beside it read, Community Access Reserve, per developer planning exhibit. The title block showed the exhibit had been created after the demolition. Melissa's cover message said it confirmed the existing access reserve. It didn't create an old right. It showed how she wanted an old planning line interpreted today. I downloaded the file, saved the portal page, saved the timestamp, and saved the old developer exhibit beside it. Then Melissa called me. I let it go to voicemail. She said the matter was becoming unnecessarily adversarial, and that we could resolve things faster if I stopped litigating by email. I replied by email. After the demolition of my residence and the conflicting project documents I've received, I will continue communicating in writing. Emergency stabilization access remains approved. I do not consent to road construction, surveying, staking, grading, or other clubhouse project activity on my parcel. The county inspector contacted me the next afternoon. His name was Jordan Pike, and he worked in the county's land disturbance and private access road section. He made his scope clear. He wasn't deciding easements, ownership, or damages. The county had approved a specific road and grading footprint, and my photographs appeared to show work somewhere else. He wanted to inspect it. We met at the property the next morning. Temporary bracing held part of the damaged structure. Heavy sheeting covered the largest opening. The graded corridor below the house was still raw dirt. Melissa arrived. So did the general contractor's superintendent. Jordan arrived with a rolled plan set and a tablet. He asked where the crew entered, where the clearing stakes had been, and where grading occurred. Then he asked the superintendent for the field plan. The superintendent pulled out the Route B revision. Jordan unrolled the county-stamped plan on the hood of his truck. For the first time, both versions were physically sitting next to each other. The county plan showed the road staying north of my lot. The contractor plan showed it cutting through my house. Jordan checked the project number, engineering firm, and revision blocks. Then he looked at the superintendent. "Where's the approved county revision for this alignment?" The superintendent said permit coordination had been assigned to the owner and engineer. Melissa stepped forward. This was a field alignment adjustment within the clubhouse access project. Jordan looked at the two plans. "This isn't a field adjustment inside the approved limits." He pointed at the stamped sheet. "The permitted grading boundary is here, then at the contractor plan. Your work is over here." Melissa said the association had underlying access rights through the area. Jordan didn't argue. "I'm not making a determination on your private access rights." He tapped the county stamp. "I'm determining what this permit authorizes." At one point, Melissa mentioned that the contractor had completed its internal demolition safety process. Jordan didn't dispute that. "That isn't a revision to this road permit. My section is looking at where the approved grading and road disturbance are allowed to occur." He walked farther down the graded corridor. The disturbed soil crossed well outside the approved limits. Moving the road also changed drainage assumptions, erosion controls, disturbance boundaries, and road geometry. Jordan asked whether anyone could produce a county-stamped Route B revision. Nobody could. The superintendent showed him the transmittal. Site control confirmed. Revised alignment cleared for field release. Permit coordination by owner, engineer. Jordan read it. "That may explain why your contractor was working from this drawing." "It doesn't make this drawing an approved permit revision." Melissa said the engineer could submit the correction immediately. Jordan said that was an option. But until the county reviewed the changed alignment, the active access road work couldn't continue under a permit showing something else. He instructed the contractor to secure exposed soil and maintain only necessary safety and stabilization measures. Then he stopped work under the clubhouse access road and land disturbance permit, pending correction and review. Melissa stared at him. "We're days from the next construction phase. Then you'll want the corrected package in quickly." The county didn't need to settle ownership. The permit showed one road. The contractor had started building another. By that afternoon, the grading equipment was shut down and active road crews were pulled from the project. The practical effect was immediate. The contractor couldn't simply move the excavator 50 feet and keep going. Route B had changed the grading limits, drainage path, and erosion plan, so the next phase depended on a corrected package the county had not reviewed. The crew secured the disturbed ground, loaded equipment, and left the active roadwork quiet. For the first time, Melissa's deadline was working against her instead of against me. Every day the road sat unfinished meant more delay, more remobilization risk, and more pressure on the clubhouse reopening date. She could no longer use the fact that construction was already moving as a reason I should get out of the way. The project was waiting on the very authorization chain she had treated as a formality. The stop work order changed Melissa's tone faster than anything I had said to her. 2 days later, I received an email with the subject, Proposed Resolution of Access Issue. The HOA said it was prepared to fund immediate reconstruction work, continue reasonable temporary housing expenses, and restore landscaping disturbed by the project. Then came the condition. They wanted me to sign a temporary construction access agreement through my parcel so Route B could continue while the association clarified the underlying access documentation. For days, Melissa had insisted the HOA already controlled the corridor. Now she wanted my signature, giving them access to it. I forwarded the proposal to the board. If the association already controls this corridor, why is my signature required before construction can continue? Melissa responded that the agreement was only intended to remove uncertainty while documentation was reviewed. That was the first time she'd admitted there was uncertainty. I didn't block emergency work. Properly scheduled crews could still enter for stabilization, weather protection, and damage assessment, but I did not agree to grading or road access, and I wasn't signing anything that let the HOA finish the route that had just gone through my house. The records response from the HOA started arriving around the same time. Buried in one packet was another email chain from several weeks before demolition. The project accountant had asked whether the budget should continue carrying the Route A contingency. Melissa said it could be held because the association had an existing developer access reserve. A board member asked whether title had actually confirmed that. Melissa said the property manager was reviewing the archive. Then the contractor sent a warning that if the alignment wasn't released by the end of the week, the grading crew would be reassigned. Another contractor email said, "Need final site control confirmation before demolition subcontractor mobilization." That message was dated 3 days before Melissa released the structure. I searched everything between those dates. No title confirmation, no executed agreement, no acquisition. No precise recorded corridor document tied to Route B, no verification report. Then came Melissa's certification, site control confirmed. The missing step wasn't hidden deeper in the file. It had been replaced by her signature. The HOA called a special board meeting 3 days later. By then, the county stop work order had been in place long enough for the consequences to become impossible to ignore. The contractor had submitted remobilization estimates. The engineer was pricing a corrected Route A package. The clubhouse reopening date had been pushed back. The association's insurance carrier was dealing with the damage to my house. The board, Melissa, the association attorney, the engineer, the contractor's project manager, and I met 3 days later. Thomas Reed opened the discussion because the decisions under review were Melissa's as project liaison. He started with the engineer. Why was Route B developed? Lower cost, shorter schedule, and it preserved 16 parking spaces. Could it be released for construction as soon as it was drawn? No. The memo required site control verification. Did your firm perform that verification? No. Thomas turned to the contractor's project manager. What did you require before removing the structure? Client turnover of the work area, property access coordination, structure release, utility isolation authorization, and confirmation that the client had site control. And you received those? He put Melissa's signed release on the table. We received this. Thomas looked at Melissa. What did you rely on when you signed it? The developer access reserve, the planning exhibit, and the planning note requiring those corridors to remain unobstructed. The association attorney leaned forward. Did anyone verify that the planning exhibit created the present-day right needed to remove this house? Melissa didn't answer immediately. Finally, she said, I believe the association already had that right. Thomas looked at her. That's not the same question. Who verified it? Silence. I put the engineering memo next to the contractor release. On one page, subject to title, site control verification. On the later page, site control confirmed. I didn't need to explain the gap. Everyone could see it. The attorney reviewed the project file again. There was no completed title verification, no agreement with me, no acquisition, and no precise recorded instrument attached to the Route B release. The old developer material might still be something attorneys could analyze separately. But it was not the verification the construction process required before the HOA released the route and my structure to the contractor. Melissa had practical control over the project. She had the vendor relationship, drawings, and authority to coordinate approved work. What she didn't have was the authority to answer an unresolved property question by signing as if someone else had already answered it. Thomas asked the engineer what happened if Route B was abandoned. Route A. And the cost? The updated number was now worse than the original, roughly $400,000 difference. The county shutdown had added redesign work, remobilization, drainage changes, and delay. Route A would still cost the project 16 parking spaces. The shortcut had destroyed the benefit it was supposed to protect. The board took a recess and consulted counsel. When they reconvened, Thomas read the decisions into the record. Route B was abandoned. The engineer was authorized to return the project to Route A on common property. Melissa was removed as sole project liaison. Future field changes touching a private parcel would require the underlying site control document to be attached before contractor release and approval from 2 authorized board officers. If a project footprint changed from a county-approved plan, revised permit status had to be confirmed before fieldwork began, and the association's attorney was directed to coordinate with the carrier and negotiate a restoration agreement with me. Melissa wasn't arrested. Nobody announced some giant punishment. She lost the specific project control she had used to push an unresolved assumption all the way into physical demolition, and the HOA was now committed to the expensive route it had tried to avoid. The board's decision also changed my position in a way no argument with Melissa ever had. Until then, every emergency repair to my house happened while the road question remained unresolved. After the vote, restoration no longer had to compete with an active plan to use the same footprint. The association could stabilize and rebuild the house without pretending it was only a temporary obstacle in a future road. I still kept every access request in writing. Trust didn't return because the board changed direction. But the purpose of each crew visit was finally clear. Protect the structure, document the loss, or rebuild it. Nobody was measuring my yard for Route B anymore. The board vote stopped Route B. It didn't give me my house back. For the next several weeks, I was still living out of a hotel, while engineers, adjusters, and reconstruction contractors figured out how much of the damaged structure could safely remain. The answer wasn't much. The excavator had reached only the front half before I stopped it, but the house had been demolished as a residence. A major exterior wall was gone, central framing was compromised, utilities were isolated, and part of the upper floor and roof couldn't remain. Restoration required removing additional unstable sections before rebuilding. The restoration contractor removed unsafe framing and rebuilt the structural core, roof support, utilities, interior, and front deck. It took months. No board meeting magically erased what happened. The financial side was resolved through a written restoration agreement involving me, the association, its counsel, and the liability carrier. The HOA funded the reconstruction required by the project damage and continued my temporary housing for the agreed period. Documented project-related losses were handled through the claim process. I did not give the HOA a Route B easement. I did not sign temporary access so they could revive the shortcut. Once the county approved the corrected access road package, construction restarted on Route A. The difference between the routes was obvious from my property. Instead of dropping almost straight downhill through my lot, the new road continued north along common land and curved around the slope. The contractor had to build the retaining section the board wanted to avoid. Drainage crews worked along the longer line, and when the final clubhouse parking layout went in, 16 spaces from the earlier concept were gone. Those spaces had been part of the reason Route B looked attractive. Now they were gone anyway. So was the money the HOA had hoped to save. The association paid for the longer alignment, retaining work, remobilization, delay, and the consequences of the demolition. They ended up absorbing the exact costs Melissa had tried to avoid by forcing the project through my property. The board also changed the release process. Work touching private property now required the supporting site control document, 2 authorized approvals, and confirmation of any permit revision. Contractors were instructed to stop and verify when site conditions contradicted the client's representation. Melissa remained around the association for a while, but she no longer controlled the Clubhouse project. I barely dealt with her after that. There was no reconciliation. There didn't need to be. Months after I came around that curve and saw an excavator sitting where my deck used to be, I finally moved back in. The kitchen worked. The living room was enclosed again. The upstairs floor was solid. The utilities were back on. The front deck faced the lake exactly where it had before the project crossed my property. From the front window, I could see the clubhouse, and beyond my yard, I could see the new access road. It didn't run straight. It continued north along common land, reached the new retaining wall, curved around the slope, and then dropped toward the clubhouse. 16 planned parking spaces were gone. The shortcut was gone with them. One afternoon, a contractor truck came down the ridge road. For a second, the scene looked almost like the morning I came home from my work trip. Construction equipment, fresh pavement, the clubhouse below. The truck reached my driveway and kept going. Then the road curved, around my lot, around my rebuilt house, and down the route the HOA had been able to use all along.